Do you ever feel stuck in your job, but dread the idea of starting over? Maybe you've built a long, successful career, decades of experience, deep expertise, but maybe shifting technology, corporate shakeups, or plain old burnout are making you ask, what's next? And more importantly, how do I make a change without going back to the beginning? Ahoy there, listeners. Welcome back to the Retirement Success in Maine podcast, where we explore how to live well, plan smart, and find deeper meaning in retirement. I'm Ben Smith, and joining me as always is the LinkedIn to my resume, the networking event to my business card, my co-host and coworker, Curtis Wister. How you doing today, Curtis?
I'm doing well, Ben. I'm doing well. I like this. Certainly on theme with today, and just definitely had my fair share of awkward networking events. But we got to do what we got to do to make connections in life, right?
That's right. Yeah. And we've both done enough chamber events and business after hours, and
That's right.
you got to have the sticker on yourself and
That's
get out
right.
there and just start talking. But obviously, speaking of connections, today's guest is someone who has built a career helping others reconnect with their purpose and professional path, especially when they're wondering, what now?
Yeah, that's right. And, like all of our shows, Ben, we love to bring in a guest, an expert. So today's guest, Mike Dwyer, he's the founder of Emplana Career. So after a long career spanning both the private and public sectors, including consulting roles at Ernst& Young and Deloitte Consulting, and earning a master's in management from Salve Regina University, Mike, our guest, launched Emplana with a mission to help others figure out their next chapter. So, Emplana Career, based in the Cambridge Innovation Center in Boston, Massachusetts, supports professionals often in tech, finance, accounting, and law as they seek clarity and direction in their next career move. So, Mike is also the author of the Emplana Career Workbook and Toolkit, a 5-day guided program to help people quickly gain confidence, structure, and opportunity. So, whether you're looking to pivot, downshift, or re engage in a new way, our guest Mike brings the tools to help. So, with that, please join us in welcoming Mike Dwyer to the Retirement Success in Maine podcast. Mike, thank you so much for coming on our show today.
I am delighted. Thank you for having me.
Well, Mike, obviously we have a lot we want to talk to today, and obviously in terms of career and pieces like that. But we also want to make sure that our audience gets to know you a little bit. So, love to hear your journey. You've worked in some pretty high-powered environments, big four firms, public sector roles, startups. What inspired you to focus your second act on helping others navigate their own career transitions?
I think I saw that collaboration is absolutely necessary. And if we have time later, I'll talk to you about some paid focus groups I commissioned and additional learnings. But just to be really clear, Emplana Career is the DBA name. You folks are financial professionals enough to
Hmm.
know doing
Yeah,
business as.
sure.
Do you know that the underlying LLC name is Career Collaboration?
Gotcha.
Now, nerd that I am, there's no marketing skill there, and even I couldn't spell it reliably. So we moved on to Emplana Career. But I think what happens after you have a long career is you realize, call it a personal board, call it me, call it you folks, convene, reflect, dive in. And obviously, the more you work on this, you start to have some frameworks and other things. But the essence of what motivates me and the people around me is to foster collaboration that's really customized to where the person is, and helping them see what a range of possibilities from very safe to quite ambitious.
Mm, I love that. I love that. And, Mike, we read one of your first career coaching experiences was actually helping a friend with his resume. And, that snowballed into a whole new career. So, can you just kind of share that moment when you realized that this was truly something that you were uniquely good at?
Well, thank you, or at least had something to say. Curtis and Ben, I'm sure already in your careers, your people will come to you and say, "Take a look at my resume." And
Absolutely.
right, and
Yeah.
what's the norm? You emphasize this. You say, "Oh, wait a minute, this is out of sequence. It doesn't make sense," or whatever. You might, if you know the person, you might say, "This is you're underselling yourself." If you know the person well, you might tune it up and say, this is a little brash, whatever. But one fine time, 15 years ago, I'm looking at a resume, and who knows why? Maybe it's because I knew the person. Some new things happened. The first one was that this was sort of a good, strong middle manager in in banking.
Mm.
And I found myself saying, should this person do a stretch for an executive role before they retire? I mean, it looked like they had another 5 to 7 years when I was working with them.
Gotcha.
Should they stretch? On the other hand, it is a joy in life to be really good. I mean, another alternative for that person would have been to consolidate as a line professional. Somebody with a 35-year career could be one heck of an analyst or, a solid white collar contributor.
Mm.
And so I guess the first thing, to answer your question, the first thing I found myself is I was playing 3D chess that time instead of just one game board.
Yeah.
And the second thing is, and this is something I've started to say a little too much maybe, but when you look at a couple of new tiles, a couple of new skills, what would you do to change the mosaic? What would be one or two things that would suddenly move you into something that's more in demand, closer to your authentic self, TBD? But I hope already in these very few minutes, you can already hear that these are always custom suits.
Yeah.
Men, women, whatever. It's always a situational ethic. What have you done? What's comfort for you? Stretch. So that's really kind of what went on. And then, of course, being a nerd from Ernst & Young and Deloitte, what do? You build a framework.
Yeah.
How would I know how to help somebody do some assessment or how to organize, etc.? So but that was the kickoff. Is for whatever reason, looking at that resume at that time changed how I look at resumes, and I'm always trying to spread this contagion. So I'm hoping that the next time you look at some resumes, you'll be saying to yourself, could this, what would it look like if this, and all the rest of that?
Sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, you just brought up some of your consulting experience, and of course, you've had careers both inside the machine and outside as a consultant, right? So, can you just talk about obviously seeing both sides of that, of the business and the organizational piece? How have those experiences informed the way that you coach your clients through major changes?
Well, one thing I'd like to bring up is that a lot of the work that I'm lucky enough to be able to do with people, developing thoughtware, whatever, is really reflection, research. I think that the direct answer to the question is how to think about how many seats at the table you've had. So, have you been the person? A great example, you're probably familiar with requests for proposals, right?
Mhm.
Especially in public
Absolutely.
sector. We got to get the yellow lines painted on the parking lot, or we got to get a new system. Well, you know what? You might be somebody who's done 100 engineering RFPs in the public sector, or you might have been a service provider who answered them. Um, and so the more of those roles you've played, whatever your domain is, whatever you're trying to do, you want to really be thoughtful. And this is, again, where you need some help. You need collaboration, a personal board to really walk through, okay, what if you were King Kong at this thing? If you had every seat at the table, what would that look like? And do you know where that leads you? There's some interesting implications there. You might have a job that you can get an 8% raise doing the same thing you're doing today, but you might find a job that's basically lateral, same pay, whatever, but it lets you take a different seat at that table, one of the different roles.
Mm.
That might be a better strategic chip to put on the poker table.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I like that. That's a great example. So this is great, right? We're getting right into kind of what we really want to discuss today, in this idea of kind of changing our work role without starting over, right? And I know for a lot of the people that Ben and I work with every day, and our listeners, we're thinking kind of people in their 50s or early 60s here. There's maybe a fear that pivoting to something new means they're throwing away everything that they've built, right? So just kind of foundational as we get into this topic for you, Mike. Why do so many people feel stuck between retire now or start at the bottom again? Like, why is there no middle there?
Well, I think Curtis and Ben, that if the natural thing is to think you're going to do it the same way the next time.
Yeah.
And if you do that, then yeah, you do need another 40 years. But what do you say we cheat? What do you say we consider? One of the things that's happening right now in a tough labor market is, I refer to, in my own mind, a job to me it's actually a monolithic thing. It's got a lot of bits in it, but it's a whole carved out thing that has a title. One of the interesting things that you can help people in starting over, moving laterally and then up, is if you look at, okay, I call it monolith. Another thing you could call it is a molecule. If you look at the atoms and say, these are elements of this job that I've done a lot, and I could bring those elsewhere, or I could put those on a freelance platform. Now we're talking.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
Gotcha. Well, you just mentioned something, Mike, in terms of obviously the job market, and I know right now we're recording, we are still in the middle of a government shutdown, federally, right? We are still seeing companies with being pretty big layoffs, right? They're announcing really great earnings, but they're also announcing that maybe to keep those earnings going in the future, that they have to shrink their workforce quite a bit. So we hear this frustration a lot, whether it's now or in other cycles, that I've applied to dozens of jobs online and I never hear anything back. Right, that the resume black hole is real, and especially in a day and age where with AI and we got screening tools that's probably helping HR do their jobs a little bit better. What's your advice for fighting back against the applicant tracking systems that are out there and getting noticed?
Well, because of your financial acumen, I can throw words around like portfolio, duration.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of this stuff it can't be single track. So let's talk a minute about the bot war. When you go to the MIT thing and 6 different universities are seeing which robot can push the other one over, that's fun. But what's going on here is not fun. And if you really want to deepen the bitterness, employers are quoted in the press now as being angry that applicants are using AI to embellish. So we have
Mm.
a complete robot war going on. And a friend sent me an article to this end, and it turns out that, what you do is you put some stuff in a white font that a human reader can't see, but that the bot does, and so on and so on and so on. So here's how what I would suggest is how to play the portfolio. First of all, if you are going to do anything in the classic cover letter and resume, you got to do some research. That I think I've mentioned to you that I work with a local career office, job shadowing, mentoring. So I have the luxury of watching a series of really sharp MBAs come by and the like. And if they're reporting, I got 6 versions of my cover letter with all the right keywords, and I'm only getting a couple nibbles, let's not spend a ton of time at that. So what do you
Hmm.
do on that front? I look for a concept I call the cover letter has to write itself. I have to look at your firm, get a read of Ben and Curtis's resume. The client, I got to be so excited that off the cover letter comes. I got to be there and look what I have. So what I'm saying is that if you do want to break that mold, the way to do it is to find something that's so interesting, a good match, that you do want to put that in play.
Mm.
But I don't think that's the only thing you want to do. Um, I'm big on, as you know, Steve Dubin and I are very big. The person who introduced us, very big on networking. I actually have a professional networking seminar registered with the Commonwealth of Mass. Blah blah blah. Steve has run commercial networks, so I think in today's world that you really want to use every opportunity you can. And I've mentioned to you before how important intentionality is.
Yeah.
So I think what we want to do, we want to look now and say, what's a couple of networking things I could do a month? How do I get out there? How do I look at eyeballs? How do I go to the place that has a meetup about what I'm interested in and say, hey, I'm interested. Could you tell me what's emerging? Can you shine some light? So now what's happening is you're nowhere near bots. You're near people. And and the
Yeah.
more of that, So one of the things I have this new thing I've been talking about is topical networking. And this is the last thing I'll say because I'm going a little long here, I know.
No, no.
It's okay. All right. Well, topical networking means if I have a choice of taking a good course online at LinkedIn, or as my colleague Steve Dubin says, driving 60 miles for a meetup, or I can talk to people who do it and learn that way, guess which one makes sense in this
Yeah.
climate?
Yeah.
Mike, I want to add something there too, because I I have a CFA charter, right? So the Charter of Financial Analysts, and so it's a pretty intensive investment designation, and so we have local colleges, universities, and they always kind of go, well, they come to me and I'll do a little mentoring, and they'll say, well, how do I get a job in this industry, and how do I meet more people like you, Ben? And I always told them, it's like, geez, the CFA Society of Maine. Yes, they mostly meet in Portland, but you can go and it's at $10, I think, to join like as a non-member a luncheon session. They have luncheon sessions, I think, like every month.
Yeah.
It's like pay $10, go to Portland and sit with a room of like 35 to 40 decision makers that are that designation, and you get a lunch and you get to learn something, and you're going to sit at table with all of them, and by the way, you're going to be the only younger person in that room, and they're going to go, where'd you come from, where, and they're going to want to know all about you. It's like, to your point about networking, is like
Yeah.
people just won't take that extra step a lot. That's what I'm seeing on the maybe the university side. And you go, the ones that do, all of a sudden, it's a feeding frenzy over them, because they go, that's the person I want to have at my company. The one that would take the extra is excited about it, motivated. They want to be in this industry. Those are the sorts of people. So I know it's an aside story, but I wanted to kind of share the networking piece of, to your point about getting focal and getting where the people are going to be that are decision makers. And then once you figure that out, is going, the cost of entry is $10 and maybe a trip to Portland, and maybe you do a run at Trader Joe's while you're down there, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Not a big deal. Just go show up at a lunch and you'll meet enough people that you'll get so many follow-up conversations and calls and Zooms. It's well worthwhile.
You got me going.
Yeah.
That's a phenomenal example. So let me tell you about joining the IEEE. Okay, I'm a nerd, but maybe you're a marketing person. Well, we got the same story for you. So it cost me, I think it's $175 a year to become an associate member of the IEEE Electrical Engineers. I don't know anything about electrical engineering, but I'm happy to pay my dues and make a small donation to their foundation. So let me tell you about two seminars, one that I attended and one that I wasn't able to. But it is so apropos. It's exactly like you say. The first one was on robotics. Actually, it was a 2-day event, and it was short money. And the first day introduced you to cloud computing. Now, this is not a vendor white paper. This is electrical engineers telling you what's going on. Day 2 was robotics. And what they did is they brought people from the University of Lowell, their robotics, and a local company, and they let us play with military robots. Wow. So one 2-man carry robot can pick up IEDs and take them safely away. And the other one is a 1-man carry 30-pounder with an extendable tail that you can toss into a building, and it'll even go up the flight of stairs, and the camera will look around and make sure it's safe for the soldiers. Now, do you have any idea how much that gets your juices flowing? And you're talking to companies, and you can ask questions like, I'm a young person. What do you need an intern? I'm an older person. Still got, what? At that exciting company, you still need procurement. You still need HR. And let me tell you about the other seminar I was unable to attend. Again, 2 days. Day 1 is we're going to teach you how to build your own drone. Oh, you don't have to buy one. We're electrical engineers. We're going to bring you parts. And, just like the being a little kid at camp, after you do the knitting, you're going to have a pothole or something. No, you're going to have a drone.
Nice.
And then, day 2, I'm going to teach you about FAA regs. Yeah. Now, it turns out there's some really interesting little sideline businesses with drones. So that's, but you got me all excited by talking about the CFAs. And I think what we're saying to your listeners is look what happens when you get serious.
Yep.
Look
Yep.
what happens when you say, what am I truly interested? What would I be willing to go pursue? I think we can all imagine some really good things coming out of any of the settings we just described.
Yeah. Fantastic. Mike, I do want to keep going here and I'm going to shift it back towards you a little bit in your work. I want to talk about the Emplana Career Workbook and Toolkit, right? It's your 5-day system. So for somebody who maybe feels overwhelmed by the idea of changing careers, really at any point, but again, thinking later career maybe in changing, what makes your approach doable and different for people?
Well, thanks. I think it's pretty simple, and so that's why. What I want to do is I suggest 5 days, but I don't care if it's 5 hours or five
Okay.
weeks.
Yeah.
It's just a handy thing to break it up. I have in front of me a little chart from that workbook, and here's the verbs, the 5 verbs that I'm suggesting from Monday to Friday: review, assess, collect, sort, and choose. So what I want to see happen is that somebody, and the reason to break it into time boxes, if we say in the consulting bit, right? We all know
Sure.
professional services on this call.
Mhm.
Um, you don't want to go down any rabbit holes and like, so what are you meant to do, as my British friends would say, what are you meant to do on Monday? You're supposed to look through some old files, contacts, email. You're looking for things that you've done, people you want to follow up with, ideas, companies, sectors that intrigued you. You're harvesting your past. And, it doesn't need to be perfect. Like any process, when you go back and look at it, some will be nuggets that you want to do more with, and some of, well, that's interesting. That's nice to have. Excuse me. And then I think what you want to do is you want to start moving towards the present and say, what am I involved with now? Am I doing? And then your concept. I have a thing I call career budget. You want to start saying, all right, what's my little time pie chart
Yeah.
for this stuff? Am
Yeah.
I doing some networking? Do I set aside some time for skills development? So by the second day, you're taking a snapshot of the influences, the books, the authors you follow. And now I hope you're starting to see where this goes. All right. So I'm going to start to kind of collect this stuff together that says, well, does this look like a different role in the same sector? Or is this starting to show me things that I could take elsewhere? And this is probably the point where I just have to stop and talk about community, personal board, and all this bit. Because
Please, yeah.
Yeah.
thank you. This is not where to go it alone. If there's anything, do we have time to talk about focus groups for 2 minutes, for 1 minute
Yeah.
about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go
Definitely.
ahead.
Yeah.
All right. So I commissioned out of my own Mike Dwyer dollars here some marketing strategists to do some informal focus groups around what do people think about career and coaching, and how do we go about it. The age cohort was more in the 25 to 40, but the result was striking. After some conversations that moved around the landscape, it netted out to be this. Well, if I'm going to get in shape, you know how you join the gym on January 1st? I'll hire a trainer, but for the career, I should be able to figure it out myself. I don't
Mhm.
buy it. I object strongly. You need help. And I love the idea of a personal board when I see it in the press, in the business press, but I think it's too passive. I think you need to convene them. So let's say it's Ben and Curtis. I'm going to count on Ben because he worked with me before. I'm going to count on Curtis because he's my cousin. He doesn't even know what I do for a living, but he'll tell me if this sounds timid
Sure.
or if it's way too brash. We need people to help us brainstorm. And this ties back. Remember, the underlying name is career collaboration.
Mhm.
So I hope you're seeing where this is going. Now by midweek, you're starting to touch base with some others, whether it's 5 hours in or 5 weeks in, or 5 days, you're starting to check with some others. And that is where you begin to think, where you're drawing out, am I just going to follow one track I'm in a good sector. I know what I'm doing. There's plenty of employment here, but I'm going to start thinking about another role or a bigger role or what skills I need? Or are we going to, again, going to your portfolio? No, when interest rates were what, 0.1%, I didn't really want to hold a lot of bonds, right? So
Hmm.
this might be time where you start talking about freelance. Now, again, nerd that I am, it turns out that guess what percentage of people on the Upwork freelance platform are boomers? Go ahead and take a guess.
Quarter?
Oh, that's generous. No, it's 9%.
Wow.
Okay.
But what the answer tells us is that it ain't lonely.
Mm.
You're not a majority, but you have no reason to stay your hand.
Sure.
Then another nerd data point is that when I look at Fiverr, there are something on the order of 700 skills. I mean, at the very top, they call it professional, career, and creative. Creative and like administrative or something. They got these giant buckets. And then when you drop down to them, you start getting into different, another layer and so on. And then you get down to just incredibly specific skills offering. And I think we're helping your listeners when in this down job market, we're saying to them, well, after this harvesting, after this midweek meeting with your personal board, you're starting to have this little sense of adventure and shopping that, and I think it's incredibly mentally healthy to be taking steps on your own behalf, not just, oh my God, this is awful, but saying, all right, what would be something I could try? And bringing that, I tell people in the networking seminar, never do a big ask. Curtis, get me a job, maybe for your brother. I mean,
Right. Right.
even then, that might be pushing it,
Sure. Yeah.
Um, but Curtis and Ben, what should I be studying as I move into this sector? What's emerging? What's a good company? You know me. What do you think I could do? What would be a good starter role for me? All right. But you did ask me something about not starting over and all. Part of this activity of the molecule, the atoms, you know, um, almost anything has admin, logistics, scheduling,
Yeah.
artifact, content curation.
Yeah.
And if you look at what you've done in the past, and I don't care if you have to volunteer for the first couple of goes, um, you want to be able to recast yourself in more of a lateral move rather than I need to start all over based on all this work we've just talked about and understanding that, hey, there's some pieces I'm pretty good at and I'm willing to put my hand up and actually volunteer. And, I mean, in the consulting firms, the fastest way forward is to volunteer for proposals. It's
Mhm.
Yeah.
it's brutal. It's guaranteed to be at least 2 long weekends and some
Yeah.
nights.
Yeah.
But you meet your local partners, directors, people find out, oh, he wrote that good, this piece or that, you know, or they'll tell you what you want to work on. I don't think you can beat that kind of get out there, try it, get feedback. And all this now is so you can say to yourself, even though I'm 54 years old or whatever you are, no, I don't need to start as the, entry level job. I could do something that's a supporting role based on what I know and then work at that hard enough and just continue to morph into the field. Is it all right to offer you a cybersecurity example? There's a pretty red hot one.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so I would never pretend to be a cybersecurity CISO. But you know what? I've done so many of these projects now just from hanging around and have clients trust me. Watch this trajectory. The first one was I was basically a gopher. I was an organizer. I helped schedule stuff. It was really on the periphery. But turns out I was willing to read the NIST and CIS standards, um, attended the sessions, found time, he took a little bit of hit on billable hours and stuff. And the next thing was working on what are called TTXs, tabletop exercises. Anyways, after a few of these, I never would claim to be a CISO, but you know what? I can teach the one-on-one course. I mean, I can tell you how to get started, what it looks like, but
Hmm.
there's a progression where all I did was show up in what's around me And I really invite people to do this. Look around, you know, figure out if you're in a place where you got to stay in your lane and they'll yell at you if you go talk to someone else. Well, that's another matter. And maybe we have a different conversation there. But I think almost anyone is willing to accept a little bit of help. One of the other things that happens to you in cybersecurity is you need insurance. To do that, you need to be able to do an inventory. What digital assets do we have? How many instances of PII? If you're willing to do some grunt work in Excel, guess what? You're and
Yeah.
I hope you're sensing the dynamic.
Mhm.
It's along the lines like it's pretty much the same as you're saying, Ben. Drive to Portland, find the CFAs.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's just a different version of it.
Yeah.
Yep. Find the room, right? And just get into that room. So, Mike, I want to ask you another question here. And we try to do a lot of scenario kind of play. And I think there's a lot of things that you can kind of learn from kind of how you respond to certain things. So, one situation we see a lot, right? Especially some people that maybe they're nearing retirement, but they want to move into leadership, right? Maybe it's just to mentor younger employees, but they've never had formal management experience, which, by the way, that's one of the big failings. I don't know, personally, just my own vantage point. Like, we never really train managers. We train skills, but we don't train a lot of kind of how to manage people and how to motivate them and how to work with them. And, just we just assume that because you're good at one job that you're going to just transition to management and be good at that job. But my question is, you've never had formal management experience and you want to get into leadership. How can I position myself for those roles without being set up to fail? Because I think the setup to fail is a big concern here.
Well, sure. And just to underpin the seriousness of this, remember, I went and got a master's degree in management. It's a big deal. But you know where I think to start is, unfortunately, I think the only thing we think of generally when we say manager is boss.
Yeah.
And actually, there's schedule management, um, resource, resource management. And so I think that if you are willing to help on areas like that, again, let me step back a little bit. If you really know a sector and you have operated at multiple levels, I mean, there's an element of assessment here. If you've been a line professional, a middle manager, and an executive, you probably are in a position where you can offer leadership,
Yeah.
even if you haven't had training. But if you hadn't, I think you want to do that same guerrilla approach that says what needs doing um, on the one track. And then the other track is, most companies have a community day. Are you willing to take responsibility for leading a team? If you'll do that and figure out who picks up who in the morning and all that stuff,
Yeah.
actually, that's management. Um,
Hmm.
and working with the people during the day. And so I think we have to be careful not to just think that I'm going to go from 0 to 60, that the next thing I want, if I've never done something more than be a white collar, an individual contributor, and I'm dreaming of running a Fortune 500 company, no,
Right.
that's too much of a pole vault.
Sure.
But I think a segue that's using an understanding that says, well, management is actually managing processes, activities, this and that. And then if you augment it, like I gave you an example, of volunteer, the team lead at the community day in a corporation. But I also think this would be a great place. I don't care if it's the American Management. I haven't been AMA. I haven't been in touch with them in a long time. Years and years ago, I went to a course. I've sent people there. But much like you said earlier about the CFAs, um, get yourself a group of managers. Um, find out, I mean, why not take a course? I don't care if it's at a community college. If you are doing things that say, I am volunteering where I am or someplace that matters, that is doing management like things, that's managing something, and I'm taking on some skills and getting some language and framework, I think we have a story.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. No, that's great. Another thing I think that we think about a lot is culture, right? culture matters a lot, especially probably later in your career. And we all know some workplaces, reward experience, others reward youth and speed. So how can somebody in this position, evaluate whether their workplace culture will support a pivot, or maybe if it's time to look elsewhere?
Well, I think actually that's one of those questions that has half the answer in it,
Yeah.
Curtis.
Yeah.
Um, but I do want to talk about this a little bit, and I'll give you a couple of fun examples. I had somebody I knew in my circle that had a long career in hospitals as a social worker,
Okay.
and ended up joining a hot startup, and it was absolutely hilarious. I was so happy for him when the company was small enough, like 30 people. And what they were 29 pictures of 30 somethings and one guy who looked like Jerry Garcia. But in that particular setting, they loved his experience. There was no stress. They just understood he was here to talk about how he'd seen it done in different settings. So that's an example where you might be a minority, but it's absolutely comfortable. There's a welcome chair for you. But I think some other things we have to struggle with. I do push a little bit on people with some sort of techniques and tests. Don't use your experience to tell war stories and harangue people. Use your experience to say, what are we trying to do next? And what have I seen that needs attention? Now, that's helpful. Another thing Steve Dubin and I have been joking about is, I said, and sometimes it might make sense to report to someone much younger than you. He said, right. And he made me said, even if it doesn't look like he shaves yet. But I'll give you an example of a woman I met in a public sector setting. She was doing process improvement coaching, and she had a room full of public sector professionals. She was sharp as a tack. I said to her, wow, that was great work afterwards. I was supporting one of the people attending. Do you have an MPP or an MPA, Master of Public Policy, Master of Public Administration? She said both. So what I think the
Wow.
older worker has to understand is that just because I tell them, even if you can't look at the person and just listen, you might hear the word like more than you like. But understand, separate your sense that I have a long career and I should be the boss. And just let the person who has the right handle on the helm do their thing and see how you can help.
Well, that's great. And Mike, I want to keep going here. This is all super helpful. I want to go back to something we or you quickly mentioned before, but it's around networking, right? And networking, as we know, for a lot of people can feel very intimidating, especially if you've been in the same job or industry for decades, right? So you created a training that has been backed and promoted by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and you mentioned that a little earlier. What advice do you have for retirees or elder career people, or even just introverts who say, I hate networking?
I got you loud and clear, Curtis. There's a young technical person in my co-working space that when I mentioned networking, I could see the recoil. This is manipulation, self-promotion. This is evil. And instead, what I'd say is, and we're going to talk about introverts in a minute, but the fundamental dynamic, I think, is to let your curiosity outweigh your shyness. You know what, Ben, I would actually love to sit in on that CFA.
It's really good. Yeah.
I just want the $10 lunch. I mean, come on,
Yeah.
$10.
Yeah.
That's a steal.
But to listen to, to listen to true experts, and as a community, that is really cool. So, but you don't want to put yourself in a difficult position. So surprise, I came up with something. I got a little table in my booklet somewhere that says, okay, let's do a little bit of a diagnostic. If you're scared and you've never done this before, my little table has 3 columns. The left-hand column is scripted and safe. Okay. That looks like this. I go to a lecture and there's a Q&A afterwards, right? I can manage that. I don't have to, we don't have to figure out what to talk about because we were just told what to talk about.
Yeah.
And then you kind of move up the food chain, and then you go all the way to the far right. Like you mentioned, the Chamber of Commerce. For here at this Cambridge Innovation Center, there is a venture cafe every Thursday night over at the Kendall Square one, the one near MIT.
Hmm.
That is 300 caffeinated people, and you better know what you're doing. Um, you know, you're just going to get drowned out or whatever. So I think if we're the right thing to do, first of all, is to get kind of a diagnostic. All right, I want to ease into this. Great, and I just explained, do something that looks like that. But I also believe strongly that this business of shopping, intentionality, selection is good for us. And so what I recommend is some trial and error. And I've taken networking and come up with a 10 or a dozen rows that say, you got your classic networking, right? Your Chamber of Commerce, your Rotary. Check out. Maybe you should be doing one of those. But if you're a young, gay, Black accountant in many parts of the country, that requires navigation. We want some identity networking. We want some folks like me, and maybe some oldsters would want that. Other things you can do are, I have this concept of a lab. Feeling a little outdated, are we? Afraid of collaboration tools? What if Mike, Ben, and Curtis download a copy of Slack and organize a golf tournament or a birthday party? What does that do for you? I want you to go from, wow, I don't know what this is, to, hey, my first impression is, right? I want you inside, and I assert that these things are achievable. Anyways, I could go on with those other categories, but I think you see the idea that with a little bit of prep and work, and I always go back to this career budget. And this is a wonderful thing where Steve Dubin and I can offer you a couple of points. He's saying, oh, if you're serious, you got to be out there at least like once a week. His colleague Mike says, you know what? 6 or 8 a year after 2 years, the cumulative effect, I mean, obviously his is the blitz, right? I mean, his is, you got 50 shots a year. You got a lot of trial and error, and you're meeting a lot of people. But that might not fit into your personality, your time, like Curtis, just had a child. Hey, we want you to go to things 4 nights a week, right?
Right.
But my point is that as few as 6 or 8 a year, year on year, you're on a different path than someone who doesn't do that.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. So, Mike, I want to obviously ask the next question here, right? Because you're talking about getting in the room and kind of what rooms to be in and that. But you have said that the best networking isn't transactional; it's relational, right? So, and I hear the introvert person that you're saying, like, no, it's evil. It's like, I think when you treat networking as transactional, it does sound very artificial and surface and what's in it for me, right? Is that. But when you start talking relational, can you kind of talk about that playbook for building real connections, especially for folks who are entering new industries or unfamiliar communities, as we're kind of talking about just opening these doors?
I do. And boy, I think you two should have a podcast.
That's a great idea. I like that.
Anyways, first of all, always avoid the big ask. I mean, what you want to do, and my colleague Steve Dubin has some phenomenal techniques. Are you, shy introvert who can get trapped by the verbose whoever? Just calmly say, hey, I was hoping to catch 10 people tonight. So glad that you were my third. Thank you. Low key, keep moving. One of the things he'll say to you, that I'm going to go back to what you said, Ben, about the CFA and I don't think you called it fresh meat, but sort of, highly attracted to the newbie. He'll tell you a story that one of his current clients he met early in his business when he decided to rescue someone who looked a little uncomfortable at a networking event. And I think we should keep that in mind, that it's okay to be rescued and it's okay to rescue. And I do think in this workbook I ask people to think about what's their mantra, what's their why am I here? And it could be as simple as I'm thinking about other career options. It could be a little more evolved that says, I really want to know more about CFAs or this or that. One of the things to do, I think, is is you can really ask questions that reflect curiosity and are flattering and comfortable to the listener. If you genuinely say, what book should I read? What class should I take? That's not something that sounds like a project to the listener. It's not off-putting. In fact, it's affirming that the person probably knows something that would be good to share, and you can get about that business. So, yeah, very much not transactional. In fact, um, having been in, I remember, I'll tell you that any kind of, from manager up at Deloitte, you are instructed that every second Friday afternoon, de minimis, you're supposed to look through some networking and contacts and think, how could I add value? What would be truly of interest to these people? And eventually you get to a point where you're living your weeks knowing this Friday afternoon's coming, and you're literally harvesting. Oh, Ben, wait till he sees about the CFA comedy stand-up. This is going to be a gas. You know what I mean? And that's very much non-transactional. And really, what the essence of there is, if you're doing that with people for a while and seeing them and caring about what they do and sharing what you think they might be interested in, listening and so on, if you one fine day say, would you take a look at some software I wrote, or I got an idea for a business, it's much more comfortable.
Yep.
It could flow nicely.
Yeah.
So how are we doing? Are we making a case here for taking that risk and doing some networking?
I think
Absolutely.
so. I think we're trending in that direction. I want to talk about something else that I think has been a through thread a little bit here today, but I want to focus on it, and that's mentorship. Okay, so we love that you asked 100 people in your network if they'd meet with somebody who needed guidance, and not a single one said no. I just want to ask, Mike, what's your advice for finding a mentor without it feeling awkward or one-sided or even transactional, like we were just talking about? Like, how do you go about really finding that mentorship?
Well, I think, Curtis, if I can say, first of all, I always want to help people feel like they're not making a final choice. That this is not, and anything is, let's keep this to where this is a pilot. So the
Yeah.
first thing you want to do is, about a mentor, I think, is you want to understand a little bit. Am I trying to find somebody who could help me? Female executives, we know from the Harvard Business Review and there's still some navigation for them that
Yeah.
may not be there for men. So they may be wanting to see someone who has been in their sector, who can coach them in kind of a pointed way that says, here's how to play that difficult boss, this kind of thing. So I think a little bit of, and this could move and change through time. So a little bit of reflection and the like that says, really, am I trying to get advice about career, about how to navigate? Do I want a generalist or somebody who's a little more specific? And so that's some prep work that would lead to, would you mind having a coffee with me or this and that? I mean, obviously you don't, I don't know that many people would say no, but would you be my mentor is kind of a lot for
It
an
is.
opening question,
It
unless
is.
you know the person really well.
Yeah.
But if you say, one of the things I mentioned, Salva University, the person who's runs a career office down there has some wonderful work on informational interviews. And so what that is about is it's safe for both parties. Yes, you're asking for a little more time. This is not just a 5-minute thing, but the person knows you're not looking for them to hire you. You're looking to understand what the role or sector is about. How do you get into it? So, you could start at one end of the spectrum. It could be as small as that and see if it goes anywhere. And at the other end of the spectrum, it could be, well, I know this person was, a president of a major consulting firm, and she was able to handle a lot of juice, a lot of volts, and I would really like to approach her about some sort of ongoing guidance kind of thing. So how are we doing? We finding our way a little bit?
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
Mike, I'll just kind of echo and just share a personal story there too. I used to work for Camden National Bank, and They had wonderful organization, and one of the things that they talked about was mentorship when I was working there, and especially as a younger person that wanted to, grow their career and learn as much as I could. The CEO kind of said, we said to all the officers, all the president, vice presidents, the assistant vice president, right, saying to a whole officer group, this group is going to be mentors. We're going to mentor everyone in our organization. We're going to coach, and we're going to get some organizational knowledge that we're all going to share with each other. But I think if we do this, we're going to create a leadership engine. Just I think Jack Welch and had kind of talked about the leadership engine a little bit, and that was some of the thought. He goes, if you haven't had someone come up to you and ask to be your mentor, I want you to go find someone to go mentor. So I then wrote him an email right after that and said, well, if no one has asked you to be their mentor, I'd like you to be my mentor. So I reached out. It's like, if you're gonna put it out there, I'm gonna call you out on it. So I was the only one to ask him to be the mentor. So I said, so he took me to lunch and coffees and all those things. It's like the amount of knowledge I got from him in terms of just who I am, where my strengths are, not just talking about obviously what's happening in the organization, which would probably be inappropriate because I'm skipping like 8 lines of management responsibilities there and lines of command, but to go talk about your personal journey and what he faced and applying it to what I'm facing and thinking about and all that, it was life changing, right? Just kind of opened up so many doors, and I appreciate him. The Greg Dufour was the name of the CEO at Camden National, who just retired. But it's one of those of just even asking the question. I know he put it out there, and there's a room that was there, but you still have to have a little courage to say, "Hey, I think I'm worried of being menteed here, and I'd love for us to have coffee. And can I buy you a coffee? And I know I'm not making what the CEO's making, but I'll buy you a coffee." And it just, he goes, absolutely, and just so happy to receive it. And it was and I'm just happy to have that relationship in my life, and that was something that just opened a lot of doors. So I wanted to share that quick little story, just obviously for Mike and the listeners there. It's kind of, it puts you out there a bit, but it really does help in terms of life connection and talk about real connection out there.
Well, you know what? I, because this is a pretty sophisticated podcast here, I'll just throw one little bit of intellectualism at you. One of my favorite social science papers of all times. Remember in the .com, all of a sudden, the .com was out attracting talent from like big four professional services firms. So basically, to cut to the quick, all those firms never had to worry about where partners and directors came from. It was like salmon spawning. Enough made it. There you go. So they actually commissioned this woman named her professor, used to be at London School of Economics. Now she's somewhere in the U.S., Hermione Ibarra. And she did this phenomenal paper on how we learn and model. And what she landed, and this Curtis is going to map right to your story. She said that if you're lucky, you do a monolithic model. If you are a 6'1" college football player and the partner in your firm is similar, you're going to give him permission to give you a little shove out in the hallway if need be, but you're going to get direct feedback, attention, and you're going to grow fast. But for the rest of us, it may take what she called collage modeling. We may be looking and seeing that, wow, that person didn't say anything in the meeting until the end, but she asked a question and we're all doing what she said. You know what I mean? Or, wow, that person was so prepared. I want to be like that. And so I think one element of this mentoring thing is to understand that we need there's trial going on. We model behaviors and see which ones work for us. And that if we're intentional about that, and finding someone who is either a good kind of generally monolithic match, or maybe a small cadre of people that, well, I like how this one does this and so on. And we can set about that work and try and improve ourselves and learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Mike, I want to ask another question too. And Amplana lives in an innovation world surrounded by startups, nonprofits, emerging economies, right? So obviously, Cambridge, right, is who you think about when you think about that. So talk about a little bit of how does that ecosystem benefit someone in their 50s or 60s who might want to bring experience to a smaller mission-driven organization?
Well, first of all, if you need some jumper cables, go to some place. I'll tell you what. Every once in a while, the MIT Enterprise Forum. My location is actually in Boston, but it's a spinoff from Cambridge
Right.
Innovation Center, and there's two
Got it.
locations in Kendall Square. Um, but you might want to just go to what's called a shootout. So every once in a while, you'll see whether it's the Mass Challenge and go. If you're anywhere near a university town, you get a shot at this. What you're looking for is a place where a few people are showing their business plan and getting feedback. And there's an organization called the MIT Enterprise Forum that I used to be a member of. I have been a member of on and off. And then I think it changed its name to eForum. But what's cool about that? Imagine three 1 to 2 year old companies, right? They're past the angel money, but this is still touch and go.
Mm,
And but they do have a product, maybe a couple clients, and maybe there's 30 or 40 of us sitting in the audience. And we get an entrepreneur in residence from the forum. We get the Samsung VC guy. We get a few leads, people who lead our sessions. And we have the luxury of listening to a few of these shootouts, breaking out into groups of 8 or 10, and thinking about this stuff. Now, this would be applied if the pulse had slowed too much on our 55-year-old. This would be putting the paddles or
yeah.
and restart, and I think doing something like that is just going to open your eyes. 10 years ago, I was seeing firms that say, we're using drones to cut what used to be 6 to 8 weeks of survey work
Mm,
into 6 days.
mm,
And you know what? The business plan said we can actually charge the same money. They don't mind because it's getting done in 10% of the time. So,
sure.
anyways, that stuff is just where to go, how to do it. Now, then, secondarily, on a more gradual, not for the paddles, not for the shot of adrenaline type thing, or the biggest coffee you can buy. You may want to get somebody who's in one of these spaces, or the Mass Challenge is an incubator here in Massachusetts. So you might want to say to yourself, hey, boy, I'd like to start going to that monthly subscription. Or I have a friend who's at a really interesting co-working space that keep telling me about, well, how about next time they have a monthly social, ask your friend if you can stop by, and start taking a look around. But, always under the heading of getting out there. But this is a
Yeah.
little bit, remember, I can talk about portfolio because of who you two are. And this is
Mhm.
a specialty. This is a specialty investment,
Yeah.
right? This one's not stock, bonds, whatever. This is, I'm going to take a tiny little track of time that's kind of, exciting research, and I'm going to go put myself into some of these things and see what's going on and see how to follow up.
Yeah, no, that's great. And uh, Mike, I'll just speak for both of us here. This entire conversation has been so fun and super helpful. I do have a final question for you. It's going to be a little different than the ones we've been asking you so far. I have to ask everyone who comes on the show. So again, the name of our show, right? Retirement Success in Maine. We're all about helping people find their retirement success here. So I got to ask you, when you get there, how are you going to find your own personal retirement success?
Um, I am well over 65, age 65. And if the day job keeps being this interesting, even
Yeah,
though sometimes it's hard and demanding,
sure.
but what I've done in the last week, no joke, is cybersecurity, cloud computing.
Mm.
I got a cert from AI 6 years ago, yeah, from MIT Sloan, the business side of it, but it was,
Yeah,
and to me, I guess my answer is potentially gradually easing into more of a retirement. But as long as all this stuff I do with people like you and labor market research and skills development informs the day job, and the day job makes me be able to say to somebody, here's what you want to do. Um, so far, I'm finding it hard to walk away.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that.
Yeah, I love that. And Mike, I want to, again, as Curtis said, thank you for coming on our show. I do want to plug for those that are listening and maybe interested, you can learn more about Mike's work at emplanacareer.com
Yep.
and also connect with Mike on LinkedIn. So Mike's very active there, open to chatting, so you can always kind of connect with him there. So Mike, thank you so much for coming on. We really value the conversation, your insights today. It was a lot of fun.
Well, thank you for your enormous contribution to it. Thank you.
Our pleasure. All right,
Yeah,
we'll catch you later. Curtis, learned a little bit more every time talking about
I
changing
know.
work roles
I
without
know.
starting over. And it's something we're hearing from our clients a little bit here and there. So
Yep.
it's good to get an expert in and have that conversation. So I know
Absolutely.
we learned a lot from Mike today. For those listening, you can go to the links then planacareer.com, LinkedIn. We'll have that in our blog. So you can go
Yep.
to blog.guidancepointllc.com /118 for episode 118
118.
and check it out there. But again, we encourage you to go connect with Mike, and if there's something he can help out with, we know he's serious about doing it. Feel free to do it because we'd love for you to improve and get to that work opening and opportunity that we know you're interested in. So
That's right.
thanks so much for listening. We really appreciate you, and we'll catch you next time.